Content warning. This show includes mention of suicidal ideation, suicidal action, and self-injurious behaviors. Please take care of yourself and skip this episode if needed.
This week on Erotic Awakening, Lee Harrington on self-harm versus masochism, ScissorTail, and shallowing.
Welcome to Erotic Awakening, an exploration of all things erotic. If you are offended by adult topics or prohibited by law, we recommend you stop listening right now.
We want to thank our latest patron supporters,
I'm Dizzy.
and Lisa.
Thanks so much for your support. It helps to keep us going.
Head over to patreon.com/Erotic Awakening today and get your bonus content and support the show.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dawn.
So we just had a fabulous time at ScissorTail in Tulsa.
We did indeed, and we got some wonderful interviews, including one that's coming up in just a little bit with Lee Harrington, longtime friend of the show.
Absolutely. So it was great to see Lee. I always fangirl a little bit and wanted to talk about this topic, even though it's
Heavy.
heavier,
Sure,
it's heavier
sure.
than normal. But we had a patron actually request us to do this when they knew we were going to be in the same location as Lee. And Lee was gracious enough to help us out here.
Yeah, it ended up being a really good interview. But before we get into that, we have a couple things to mention. For example, we just came back from, including sex, for those that are interested in that. So just hold tight for the sex. But we just came back from ScissorTail, which is an event up in the Oklahoma, and just had a wonderful, wonderful time. They do such a good job of putting that event together. And the event, the presenters they brought in, the contest that was run, it was just a wonderful time.
Absolutely. We met some good people, ran into other people that we knew. And yeah, that's the power exchange contest, correct?
Correct.
Indeed. They had a drag show and a glow party and lube wrestling and
Yep. There was even a play space offsite if for people that were interested in that. But you know, you and I never ended up going to the play space simply because, and I've tried to explain this to people before, all the events are basically the same format. You show up, you register, blah, blah,
go
blah.
to some classes. Yeah.
But the energy that they maintained, and by they, I mean, well, just not just the producers, the staff, and the attendees throughout the entire event, it felt very welcoming, very inclusive, very friendly. It just felt like if it's going to be one of those events, when you go back, it's going to feel like going home.
Absolutely. So we actually never left the hotel.
No, we
So
didn't.
for any reason, we just kind of, when we were done being in our rooms, we went down and hung out in the social space with people and had great conversations.
I had a wonderful time. Next year, 2026, September 25th or so. So go ahead and mark that on your calendars now. We would love to see you there.
Absolutely. We plan on going back.
And one more thing before we get going into the show, we're going to talk sex. But first, before we talk on the podcast about sex, what if somebody wanted to talk to us in person about sex?
Whoa. Oh, we would love that. So we are going to be at EV in Phoenix later this month.
And then Midwest Leather Kink Alliance in Kansas City in September.
And Naughty Revival in Minneapolis in December.
Keep up with all our events, book news, and discounts, and more via the Erotic Awakening newsletter.
And get your EA shout out like Scott in North Carolina
And Patrick in Sweden.
and Callie in Texas.
Head,
We went international.
we
again.
again,
Yay.
yes. Head over to eroticawakening.com, subscribe today.
Ooh.
And then finally, before we get into our fantastic interview, Dawn, you found an article on shallowing.
Actually, I didn't. It was another patron. I think
Oh, okay.
this was either Minotaurus or Basanos. I think it was Minotaurus. And yeah, this thing on shallowing, and it is like they're pretending this is a new thing. So he sent on our Discord, he sent a link to this article, Shallowing 101, your guide to this trending penetration technique. There's some of us or some guys that have been doing this for a very long time. And what this means is shallowing. What this means is when you're having sex, when you're having penetration, vaginal penetration.
Ooh,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's, very, very sciencey sounding.
Exactly. So when you are fucking okay, I'm getting better at doing that on the show. Anyway, instead of going deep and hard and deep and fast, which is what we are shown on porn, which is what we are told every female bodied person wants, that's not always the case.
Right. There are a ton of nerve endings right at the entrance of the vagina, the pussy, whatever word you want to use, and stimulating those by shallowing is just a great word for it. It gives you a nice visual, is a fantastic sex technique. I used that on you over the weekend, by the way.
I know.
Okay, didn't know if you noticed.
I absolutely noticed, and I absolutely love it. There is nothing wrong with deep and hard, right? You know, the whole primal animalistic thing. But paying attention to the entrance, to the opening where all those nerves are. I mean, the clit itself is so much bigger. It's such a bigger nerve bundle than, oh, don't get me started on that topic.
Then what's just showing on the surface, you mean?
Showing on the
okay.
outside. So all of that is like bundled together. So when you pay attention to that at the opening, that is amazing. But they're calling it a new trend. Now, something that you probably didn't know, Dan, is that on my list of things to buy for myself coming up soon, I actually put a toy on there that I want. I need to find it, and I will. I haven't done the research or the looking yet, but I want something that's not so long, but is wider.
Okay.
And that is specifically for that, so that it doesn't bump my cervix every time, right?
Ooh.
I want something that is shallower and a little wider so that it, plays with those entrance nerve things. But according to this, it is a trend
You
of
keep
people doing
going back to that.
because it's like,
See,
whenever they say something's a trend, it's like, do you know what else is a trend with the younger folk now?
and what's that?
Writing your name without lifting the pen. Cursive. They have turned cursive into a trend.
Well, look, if you were on the TikTok, you would know what the influencers are telling us that we care about now.
Exactly. So this is actually a pretty good article, right?
It is a solid article.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely.
Do we have a link to that to our patrons
we
or
do,
listeners somewhere?
Yep. I will put that on the show notes.
Fantastic.
When we put this out. Absolutely.
And from here, we're going to get into that wonderful interview with Lee Harrington. And again, as the top of the show, we did mention a content warning. I'm just going to reiterate real quickly. If it's going to bother you to hear about the suicidal ideation and self-harm, you might want to skip this part coming up.
Absolutely.
So Dawn, you and Lee Harrington were just sitting around talking, and I'm totally lost on what we were talking about. I came in the middle. I'm not sure if you're talking about some fun BDSM activity or some self-harm activity. So get me caught up on what this conversation's about.
So, okay, indeed, because we were having a pretty little deep conversation there, but I do want to throw out that this is from a patron of the Erotic Awakening podcast that wanted us to interview Lee, knowing that we were going to be in the same spot. Yay! It's been so long since this has happened.
And is that one of those patrons that you made up so we can hang out with Lee more, or is this a real person?
No, this is a real person.
Okay,
this is a real person, and actually met and spent time with her in Chicago recently. But this is a pretty heavy topic, probably, yes. And this patron, Ruby, I can say her name. She has told me I can. So Ruby saw that you were doing a class on this. She wasn't going to be able to make it. And she's like, you know what? This is something that we really need to talk about more in the kink community. So people don't talk about it.
So start me at the beginning.
Yes,
so
sir.
Lee, start me at the beginning. What is the class we're talking about?
So at Thrive BDSM and Mental Health Conference, that is a free online conference that has both a professionals track and a everybody track. I had a chance to present information from a project I did many years ago and then discuss its current applications on the intersections, similarities, and differences between self-injurious behavior, BDSM, and body modification.
Okay.
Yeah, the third, body modification. Right.
Though the presentation I was doing for Thrive focused on the first two. Right. And it was really great to kind of dust off some of this information because back in 2012 and 2013, I got to do, along with an individual by the name of Morpheus NYC, a project that was on these topics. We did a small qualitative study We put out a call originally. We had 25 people apply for getting to be interviewed, asked a lot of questions, because our goal was to be able to interview a core group of people to help us figure out what a quantitative study might include.
Okay.
And in doing so, we had 10/11 participants. I say slash because one of the people was a system or had dissociative identity disorder.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we worked with their therapist to be able to interview two of their selves on this topic because they had slightly different opinions on it, which was I didn't get to be the interviewer on that project, but the statistics were really interesting. And in doing so, it was such an honor to get to have these people trust us, right? So when I present these numbers, it is a small group. We are talking about just a small sampling who all were between the ages of 19 and 42. We had 6 cis women, 2 cis men, and 2 trans men as part of the project. And all of them were involved in BDSM and kink, and 9 of them were involved, 9 out of the 10 were involved with body modification. 8 of them had reported having been sexually abused at some point, and 9 of them had been physically, emotionally, or psychologically abused at some point. Traumatized or abused. So that's the statistic we're looking at. We're also talking about people who are all in North America. We're not talking US. Some of them are also Canadian.
Okay.
Because sometimes people say North America and they're just like, well, I'm like, no, what you mean is the US, right? Be honest about it. Be honest about it. And the other way that this class ended up coming back to the forefront is because the folks at Rain of Blood,
Ooh, yeah.
I had gotten a chance to talk to the folks from that podcast and also who do that conference. Check out both of them if this is a topic that's passionate to you.
I think we just met them.
Well, there's some folks that are U.S. and some folks that are that are in South
The Ring
Africa.
of Blood. Oh, got it. Okay.
So I was talking to the person who's from South Africa about self-injurious behavior. And she was like, I don't understand why folks in the United States are so touchy about the topic. I mean, people do intense sensations with their own body, and doing things like piercing and cutting are just other intense sensations. And I had to explain to her that in the United States, self-injurious behavior is a thing that in many cases is a required reporting action for people who are therapists. And so there's a chance that even if you out yourself as doing self-injury, including consensual, desired, erotic self-injury, outing it, there is a chance that your therapist might have you institutionalized. Right? And so there's a lot of people who don't want to talk about it out loud, even to their therapists, because they're really concerned that something's going to happen. This woman from South Africa is like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, she was gobsmacked. Like, this idea that people doing consensual, desirous, erotic activities to themselves could be vilified and and mental health incarcerated, right? Effectively, that could happen. And so both these things came together for doing this class for Thrive. And I really appreciate Ruby asking the question of like, what were some of the things that were similarities and differences? Because a lot of it that were differences was around how you feel afterwards.
Oh.
Right? So there's both how you feel before and what's your original intention.
Right.
But how do you feel afterwards? So going into it, the different, because both parties might say, I need to let go of pain. Right? I want the world to not hurt anymore. That might be in both population groups. But how do you feel afterwards? Kinksters were like, I felt rejuvenated, or I felt emptied out of my pain and I got to start the next day fresh.
The endorphins kicked in. Holy cow.
Right, or I got to smile afterwards. Like all of these emotions that one might label positive. While people who were doing self-injury when it comes to things like attached to suicidal ideation, right? Folks who were doing self-injury because it was a way that the world just hurt too much, and harming yourself was easier than feeling the emotional pain. Those kinds of situations, people afterwards felt like they had to hide stuff. felt like something had gone wrong, felt like they were a bad person, didn't want to talk about it to anyone, compared to the kinksters who were like, yeah, I totally want to talk to my partner about it, right?
Or see this bruise? See this thing?
Because for folks that's the intersection, something like a bruise might be, I get to see this bruise heal, and it's proof that I heal inside my heart, right? Inside my mind, inside my journey. A bruise is proof that life goes on, which is very different in many ways from I'm doing an intense sensation so that the brain stops hurting. And so I found that really interesting. And there was a question, I think, it's your Discord survey, yeah?
Yes.
I thought there was, because there's a whole feed. If people are on here, go check out the Discord server. Like, seriously. There was a whole stream of folks talking about this topic.
Yeah, I had to play catch up today to make sure I got the questions before we interviewed you, because people were chatting about it.
People were chatting about it. And this idea of, well, why don't you replace the taboo suffering and fear of wanting an intense sensation to make your brain go quiet? What if you do that in kink, right? We were talking beforehand about the idea of having that happen so that you can just smile afterwards. Let that angst go. And there were some interesting points on that. One idea of how it was controlled by, again, we're only talking to 10/11 people. So this is a small sample group. But one person talked about the idea that instead of being shamed for doing this, their dominant gave them a box of hypodermic needles.
Okay.
And taught them how to do safer piercing practices and said, you can hurt yourself. I'm not mad at you. You are not a bad submissive. But I just want you to tell me when you run out of needles, and I'll give you I'll refresh it. But I just want to be aware of how much you're hurting yourself. Right? It was this ability for them to show care. What a beautiful way to do that, right? It was an interesting idea. Another person reported the notion that, however, like the flip side is that they would, when they were craving self-injury, what they would do instead of using a tool, because their dominant had told them, you can't do that. Right? You can't do that. So what they simply would do is not safe word. They purposely would not safe word as a way to be able to experience that desire for self-destruction. Right? Which is different than I just want a sensation.
Right.
They were looking for being able to go over the edge and suffer and prove that they are not worthy and go into all of that stuff, which meant that their dominant was non-consensually abusing them. Right? Had no idea he was doing that. No idea he was doing that. And so, like, it could be this whole spectrum of stuff. And there were people who reported that they don't self-injure anymore because they found a kink community. And other people for whom they said, that there was one person of the group that said, I can't watch other people do play that resembles my self-injurious pattern because it actually makes me want to do it more.
Okay.
And they just have to tap out of being in the room as any of those kinds of things because it can be emotionally, understandably, emotionally activating. So it was really interesting to get to kind of share this stuff with this group of therapists in the professional track. And I'm actually going to share with your patrons, if it's okay with you, the resource that I gave to all these therapists of questions that a therapist can ask their patient to figure out, is this kink or is this a self-injurious practice that is that can be quote problematic, harmful, reflective of suicidal ideation or a concern towards suicidal action.
I wonder though if a therapist's perspective is going to say, I don't care. I need to figure out what the root cause is so that they won't have to do that anymore. Whether they don't have to self-harm
But it doesn't work like that.
But I'm playing devil's advocate.
No, because there are therapists who believe exactly that. I used to go to a lecture at ASECT years ago, can't remember the presenter's name, but he argued that sexual fantasy is based on trauma. I mean, this is Freudian direction, right?
Sure,
He was
right.
a Freudian whatever. He argued that erotic fantasy is in fact a cancer upon the healthy mind, and that therapists must be oncologists to build healthy sexuality.
No.
Do
Do you see our faces of like shock? It's like, oh my God.
I left, because it was a plenary speech. I left that plenary speech so mad.
I bet.
So mad. His case studies were fascinating, and like was able to tie in like, here's what we know, like here's what the fantasy was. That these were mostly kinky fantasies, right? Here's what the fantasy was, and he figured out over the course of anywhere from 5 years to 15 years the root thing that was attached to it. Where did this kink come from? And it was interesting. Great, interesting case studies. But what was also troubling to me, though, is the idea that we have to exorcise these things, rather than, at least for myself now talking about my personal experience. This is me, Lee, talking about my own personal journey. I have a sexual arousal involving eating food off the floor.
Okay.
I can pinpoint exactly that it comes from lack of access to food when I was a street punk and had to eat food out of dumpsters, and my excellent brain, my beautiful brain, instead of saying I'm a bad person or like going into trauma anytime I see food whatsoever, like any of that, my brain went, you know what? Why don't we have this get you wet? Right?
Right.
Why don't you just enjoy the fact that you had a really hard time and now you get to delight? Why wouldn't I enjoy delight? So that's why I argued, like, that's my difference of opinion with, I think the book, this gentleman, I'm not remembering his name, but it's Somebody is Sleeping in My Head.
Yeah.
Is the name of his book.
Well, you know, it was Dan's first wife, still on topic, I swear.
Okay, no, I believe you.
Dan's first wife who helped me be okay with being a kinky person. Because we had kind of the same background, and we were still talking at the time, and I went to her and I'm like, you know, I'm into kink and I'm afraid it's because of my past trauma.
Right.
And she's like, it could be.
Yeah.
But do you need to know that? Are you having fun? Are you okay? I'm like, I'm having fun. I'm okay. She's like, are you growing as a person? Are you harming anyone? I'm like, I'm growing as a person. I'm not harming anyone. She's like, then enjoy the fuck out of it.
Right.
And I'm like, done and done. I don't need to know the past, what caused it. Why spend 15 years trying to figure that out when I could be spending 15 years on having a good time?
But those are two very different approaches to the same
Yes.
concept, right? There is nothing wrong with deciding this is a thing that's happening for me and I want to know where it came from. And then once you know where it comes from, making a decision, do I still want to engage in this or do I want to exorcise it?
Makes sense.
But it's that decision point.
Yeah.
Right? Whichever one you chose, whichever path you chose, the I don't want to know or the I need to know every detail. Either path, once you know, is your therapist giving you a chance to ask, do I want to get rid of this thing?
Or are they just feeling that that's the path that has to be taken?
That is the path that has to be taken. Now, mind you,
Black.
that's a personal opinion. Right. That does not come out of the small project. That's not any of that. That is a personal opinion.
Same, yeah.
And it is worthwhile to consider the therapists you're working with. Are they people who are taking you on a track that says this is the only way you can reach healthiness? Or is there space for a conversation and personal choice and empowerment for you as a client? And I think it's tricky because a lot of therapists haven't been given space to have these conversations, right? Individuals haven't, especially in the United States, where even reporting it can lead to being sent away.
Right. Even just sharing it, sharing. So some of us get really lucky with the right therapist. I had the right therapist. So she was at the beginning of my healing path when I could have gone the totally self-harm direction, but I had found a kink and I got to talk to her about it. And
And it's important to remember, though, that because people often think of like even the title for the class was Cutting and Kink. There is a story of what self-injurious behaviors look like, right? Oh, you're cutting up your arms or your thighs because there are things that can be hidden, like that kind of stuff. But the number of especially cisgender men I know who headbang, who punch, who purposefully pick fights so somebody else will throw a blow, right? Those can all be self-injurious behavior patterns as well. Using lots of drugs, compulsive sexual behavior. And so when we start talking about, say, things like compulsive sexual behavior, kink becomes a blurry topic too.
That's true.
Right? So therapists also get to, and individuals get to tease out questions like, what does it feel like afterwards after you pulled that train?
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, oh, you know, it's just what I needed to do is a very different response from, fuck, I can't believe I finally got to follow a fantasy. Oh my God, that was so amazing. Right? Two deeply different responses. But sometimes people will see you're into kink. Oh, wait, is this compulsive in your erotic behaviors? Because compulsivity of any sort could also be a manifestation of self-injurious behaviors. It's not always cutting.
Good to know. Good to know. I like how you mentioned that it's not, like you said, not always cutting, which is what we see on TV, which is what we see on, you know, everywhere. It can be disguised as something else.
Or as simply other technologies that people have accessible to them. I've met many people over the years who do things like burning, right? Branding themselves effectively with lighters and things like that because that's the tool they had available to them, right?
But back in the 80s, that was a thing. We had Bic lighters, we heated them up, and we made smiley faces.
Exactly. Well, and that's where it goes back to the conversation with the person from South Africa, where it's just like, yeah, we did this shit.
Yeah.
Right? We play with pain and intense. How many people do you know that are like, I am going to get the hottest Thai food available so that I can suffer?
We do know some people, but we're around weird people.
Right. It is a form of self-injurious behavior.
Yeah.
But what's the after effect?
Yeah.
It's pride. It's joy. It's
that sriracha. Oh, I made, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I got to eat that thing. That was so effing amazing, right? Or the big lighter thing and the smiley face. It's, oh my God, that was so stupid, but super fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's a very different response from my heart hurts so much. Right? Or the pain of life is shutting me down. Like those are different lead-ins. And I can't talk about it. It's horrible. I'm a bad person is a different lead out.
So I am a listener of the podcast. I'm practicing some level of self-harm. When I look in the mirror after listening to this, what is the question I'm going to ask myself to say, I need a therapist to fix this behavior, or this is self-care?
How is it affecting your life? Right? How is it affecting your life? Do you wake up tomorrow and take a deep breath and go, oh, this feels so much better and my heart is lighter, or laughter is present, or a cathartic release has happened, isn't this joyous? Or is it, shit, all of the pain is back? Is it like, because there's the difference of how long does this technology last for you? And that's one thing I would consider.
Okay.
Another thing I would consider is what repercussions is it having on your life as a whole, right? Because is it, if your shame is hitting you all the time, that's adding into that weight.
Yep.
And so is this shameful? Are you concerned that you're going to be, you know, setting a bad precedent for your kids, or you're, you know, whatever it might be? That's the other question I would really consider.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And a note though on therapists, not everyone out there has access to therapists who understand the nuances of these conversations.
That's very true.
Right? So to consider as well, who else might you turn to if you realize this might be hard? Maybe it's an elder of your community, right? Maybe it's a close friend. Maybe it's finding a peer on a social media platform that you build trust with and are game to say, hey, I've got some heavy stuff going on. Are you game for a conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's what the topic is. Are you still game for the conversation?
Mm-hmm.
And then say thank you afterwards.
Yep.
Absolutely. And we forget that we have other people. We don't have to go the therapist route,
Yeah.
right? So luckily, I know you know like Barrick and Shiva.
Yeah.
So they get to, and Dan and I also get to go to like OSU, and I know you do university sometimes
Yes.
as well, where we talk to the students and we talk to like incoming new psychologists and psychiatrists, and we're like, hey, we're kinky. You're going
Right.
to run into kinky people. Let us tell you what this means and what it looks like. So they at least get a little bit of the language and the
Yes.
verbiage, and that it is a thing and not something that many of us hide anymore.
Though I will always remember Barrick telling me that the easiest way that when he would train folks who are EMTs,
Uh-huh.
the easiest way you can tell it's kink rather than abuse from an outside source is symmetry.
Yes, it is very true.
It's just such a quick and easy way, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, flogging, symmetrical, avoiding the kidneys. Pretty quick and easy way to tell.
Yep.
Literally, my doctor, years and years ago, little off topic, but symmetry.
Yeah.
I had to go in because I was getting random bruises on my calves and forgot and had a play party 2 nights before that doctor's visit.
Yeah.
And she's like, so I want you to undress. We're going to look at the rest of your body and see if you're bruising anywhere else. And I had to drop my head and go, so I do have more bruises.
Yeah.
These are consensual, and I know about these and where they came from. And she looked at how they were symmetrical,
Uh-huh.
and she's like, yeah, that's from play.
Well, and that's another thing to consider too is self-play, right? Because people use terms like play, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm doing
Yeah.
autoerotic play.
Uh-huh.
We look again at things like symmetry,
Yeah.
distribution of sensation, activities that are desirous and set up for our long-term health and joy.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very different thing. For
Then-
many people, there is crossover for some,
Yeah.
but it's different for many people than,
Yeah,
using
yeah.
another tool.
So I tell the story on occasion of how the first time you and I and Dawn met each other, we were talking at Bramblewood,
Yes.
and we were having a great conversation. And in the bar nearby, there's a couple fucking, and all I could think of was, will you just have an orgasm? I'm trying to talk out here. I was like, what is going on with my kink life? Lee, where can people find you nowadays?
Oh, well, my website is passionandsoul.com. On Patreon, you can find me with the same handle, Passion and Soul, and same with pretty much every social media platform out there, from Instagram to Fetlife and everything in between.
Fantastic. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, and going to continue to enjoy our time here at the wonderful ScissorTail conference, the little bit we got
Absolutely.
left.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee.
Absolutely. It was great to see you both.
Be a part of the Erotic Awakening podcast community.
You can support us on Patreon and get early access to the ad-free version of the podcast, a free version of the audiobook Polyamory Toolkit, free ebooks, discounts on monthly Zoom classes, member-only Discord access, and more.
That's 3 free things you just said.
And I just handed some out to the patrons I joined.
Find all the goodies at patreon.com/Erotic Awakening today.
Help others find us. Take a moment to support the podcast. Rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Or just tell your friends.
Join the conversation with us and other listeners.
Use the links on the Erotic Awakening website for our growing Discord channel.
Feel free to reach out to us. We love interacting with you.
Contact us with questions, podcast comments, or just to say hi.
We are Dan and Dawn on Fetlife,
And Erotic Awakening on Instagram.
or just email us at dananddawn@eroticawakening.com.
By Dawn.
Bye, Dan.
Cool.
Thank you.
Goodbye.